Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. In today's episode, the accidental MC against world expert. My work decided my sweater was sweatery enough. So here comes my new wardrobe. Loss prevention wants us to put in service calls. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. The accidental MC against world expert. This occurred back in the 70s, and before I start, I want to emphasize, I was never stupid enough and will never be stupid enough to use my hidden talent. Background. I was taking an elective criminal forensic (CSI stuff) night course at a local community college. The best part about taking this course was the instructor, which meant an in-depth tour at the U.S. Criminal Forensic Lab where he worked as the question document examiner, I.E., handwriting analysis, signature matching, etc. Also, since computers were barely introduced into forensics at this time, all handwriting analysis/matching was done by hand, and this instructor was one of, if not the best, in the world. The MC, as good as I remember. It was a great course studying many facets of criminal forensics and taking the amazing lab tour. As the course was coming to the end, the question document facet approached, the instructor's specialty. At the end of the class, just before it started, the instructor wrote a paragraph on the board, and we each had 2 sheets of blank, lined paper. He told us to write the paragraph, only the paragraph, any way we want on one sheet and then again on the other sheet, trying to disguise our handwriting. You are committing forgery. The instructor left and we all started writing. When done, one student, not me, collected all the sheets, mixed them up, and took them to the instructor. We all looked forward to the next class where the instructor would present matched sheets, then explain to us why our forgery attempts failed and how he would testify in court to prove it. Because I wanted to go home, I made it easy on myself. For my forgery attempt, I wrote the paragraph in print on one sheet and in cursive on the other sheet, even though we were told that it is a failed way to disguise handwriting. Now for a little background on my handwriting. It's bad, I mean really bad, and I have held pencils/pens wrong since I learned to write. The easiest way to explain it is I write with a closed fist, right-handed. In elementary school, my parents hired a tutor to try to teach me to write again from scratch, including putting plastic things on pencils to make my preferred grip uncomfortable. It failed miserably. In high school, I had a teacher tell me I would amount to nothing because I had issues writing legibly. Basically, my print is somewhat legible and my cursive, good luck, but that should make no difference. Now, back to the story. At the beginning of the next class, the normal happy-go-lucky instructor looked very upset as he walked in. The first words out of his mouth was if anyone played a practical joke on him, he did not appreciate it. The whole class, 15 students, looked at each other totally confused. The instructor then again tried to get someone to confess, but we all continued to look confused. The instructor calmed down a little and decided to continue with the class as he would normally have done so. From the stack of papers he was handed at the end of the last class, he picked out the top 2 sheets and said in court speak how he deduced that the same person wrote both paragraphs. Then a student would admit it was their failed forgery attempt and the instructor would continue with the next 2 sheets. When there were just 2 sheets left, the instructor lifted them up for all the class to see. Looking straight at me, he said he could not testify in court saying the same person wrote both paragraphs. With a scared look on my face, I said both sheets were mine and I wrote both paragraphs. So in front of the instructor and whole class, I again wrote the paragraph, once in print and once in cursive. The instructor walked away, shaking his head and mumbling something like he had never seen this before. After that, the instructor looked at and spoke to me differently as my classmates created some obvious nicknames for me, example, the forger. I got an A in the class and was very happy when it ended. Trying to anticipate some questions. Exactly why I could do this, I have no idea. I figured if I was in school today, I would be diagnosed with some minor learning disability. No, I cannot demonstrate this now. I have not written in cursive in 40+ years and too old to relearn. Cursive, think loopy letters all connected together, which thankfully is being forgotten. I did make a new account for this post. In the 80s I found a career that matched my handwriting skills, computers. Edit, I saw some debate on whether this is an actual NC. I thought it was in the realm, but if not, thanks to the admins for letting it stay up even if I unintentionally strayed from the definition. Career that matched your handwriting skills. A doctor writing prescriptions. Me too. My handwriting has only gotten worse through the years because I rarely do it. I'm amazed that any envelope that I address ever finds its way to the correct recipient. Just as an aside, I'd like to give a shout out to community colleges. People wrongly assume they're being taught by lower tier professors, not so. My daughter insisted she go another semester before transferring to a state college. Why? Because her professor had his photographs in the Getty Museum. He did. Today, she's a commercial photographer in New York with her own business. Another, my husband prints everything. Even his signature, some letters are oddly connected but not in a conventional way, they look printed. His background is in military electronics, but later he worked for a civilian contractor, early space exploration, everything had to be printed to reduce margin of error, long before computers. He still prints. Yet another, long ago I kept my 5-year-old nephew when his parents took a European vacation. He ran full speed down the driveway and fell, his thumb was dislocated. I knew he needed to see a doctor, old AF medic here. I typed out a letter giving myself permission to authorize any treatment. Practiced a few minutes and forged my BIL and SLS signatures and we went to the ER. I'm a fine art oil painter and feel that was my leg up to a satisfactory forger, at least it fooled the hospital. You've got a voice for newspapers and handwriting for typing. I only have one question that was not included in your FAQ. Were you by any chance born left-handed and forced to transition to right-handed as a small child? My brother was, and he had some of the worst handwriting I've ever seen for a long time, and the awkward pencil grip as well. Now that he's been writing right-handed for over 40 years, either it's getting better slowly or I'm just learning to read it more easily. Good question, but no, I did everything right-handed. But it was not unusual to have that change forced on kids. I remember the stories from friends. I'm left-handed, and when I was learning to write, I'm 35 now, do the maths if you want, my teachers either gave me a pass on bad handwriting or just didn't care. My writing is legible, but not good either. I get by LOL. If it makes you feel better, handwriting analysis is mostly bunk and I'd bet your instructor did half that matching based on pen type and color. I mean, he probably could match the handwriting G to tell who wrote it, but any analysis beyond so and so wrote this is def bunk. My cursive was terrible, so I switched to printing in high school. Over 40 years later, I installed a keyboard app on my phone where I could do handwriting on the screen instead of typing or sweeping on a keyboard. The app somehow worked better with my unreadable cursive than my printing. So I was writing cursive that would never be seen or judged by another human. I used that for a few months, and then I tried using cursive on paper. It was actually legible. I've been writing in cursive part of the time for maybe 5 years now, and while I wouldn't say my cursive is great, it is functional. Legible, faster and more compact than my printing. And I actually enjoy writing cursive now. Absolutely hated it as a kid. In the 80s I found a career that matched my handwriting skills, computers. That cracked me up. It's like having a face for radio. So in Switzerland we learn both print and cursive, and I use a mix to write nowadays. Canadian here, but I also mix my print and cursive to write, have been doing so for years. Basically the path of least resistance is what I take. If it's easier for the flow to use cursive, I do, and if not then I stop and print. Most people tend to have a difficult time reading my handwriting, but I mostly write notes for myself nowadays, so doesn't matter anyway. I had my checkbook stolen way back in '95, and was able to prove the signature wasn't mine because it was actually readable. Bastards wrote $300 of bad checks on a $100 account. I needed that money for foods. You probably have dysgraphia. It's like dyslexia but for writing instead of reading. My son has it. As he enters his GCSE year next year, we are grateful for his iPad. My work decided my sweater was sweatery enough. So here comes my new wardrobe. I work at a huge warehouse store that you all shop at. I'm a cashier. I ring you up for basic things. Our managers are switching positions constantly, so they change the wardrobe rules on the fly. The other day I went to work and was basically sent home because I wasn't going to buy a new shirt. And I had worn this shirt 100 times before over the past 6 years there. I even bought it there. So, the rules say that for females it has to be a blouse. What is that anyway, a sweater or a collared shirt? These are the only rules. So I've been working on my new, entirely dress code compliant tie-dyed wardrobe. I've got at least a dozen blouses, polos, sweaters, etc. now. I've done a few pieces for co-workers too. Walmart did the same thing to me. I had found these nice button-downs on sale, so I bought several green and several navy blue. Literally took them into the back and compared them to the color chart and they matched perfectly. Wore them for a couple years. New manager comes in and says it's not the right color. We go to the back and put it next to the chart. See, it matches. He just doubled down and said no, it doesn't. You can clearly see the difference. It doesn't match at all. Go home and change and come back with the correct shirt. Well, I walked to work. About 2 hours later, I showed back up with a cheap t-shirt in the correct color. It was the exact same shade as the button down, yet it was somehow correct. He just didn't want to admit his mistake. He was fired for stealing money from the cash office not long after that, and I started wearing the button downs again. Nobody else ever had a problem with them. Is it Costco? Sounds like Costco. One front-end sup with a chip on his shoulder and shit to prove made a big stink about my shirt not being tucked in. I then pulled out local dress code up, we had a printout, and showed him it said tucked in preferred. Yeah, well, it looks better tucked in. Then make it a rule. I thought it sounded like Costco too. Yeah, well, it looks better tucked in. You do too. Now get to bed, young man. I worked at UPS, and our dress code was basically no sleeveless shirts, no obscenities on clothing, and steel-toed boots. So on the day of our big safety inspection, when the guys came down from corporate and talked to each and every one of us, the guy who worked next to me on the belt showed up in a full-on, black and white spotted cow costume. Horns, udder, everything. He wore his steel-toed boots, too, so he was dress code compliant. You could tell the supervisors really wanted to say something to him but couldn't. A blouse is defined as a woman's shirt. So technically it's any shirt bought in the woman's section. It also has an old defunct definition of a bell-sleeve tunic. So unless they are going to give you a wardrobe allowance, most likely will have to hire a designer to make them, as well as a dry cleaning allowance, tell them to pound sand. A blouse is tied around the collar and neck, allowing the fabric to blouse out. Good for you. I can understand rules for not wearing something too revealing or something with holes, but what they did sounds stupid. As I see it, if a company wants to dictate what employees wear, to the extent of the colors of various items, then they should be providing that clothing for free. A lot of retail clothing outlets have a policy that their floor people need to wear parts of their current stock. And there are standards on how it's supposed to be worn. It's not free, but it is discounted. I was in the military. Got called out once by my commanding officer for being out of uniform. I went directly to the admin office to retrieve the uniform regulations he had signed 2 months prior that made it clear my choice of uniform was in accordance with his rules. I took the signed regulation and showed it to him. He said, "I'm glad we cleared that up." A place I worked had a collared shirt rule, so I wore Hawaiian shirts. It was compliant, and it was fun. My great-grand boss asked me, grumpily, right before an all-hands meeting, what the deal was. I said, well, it's compliant, and it's fun. Turns out the meeting was about having fun at work. Loss prevention wants us to put in service calls. This may be my last contribution due to the upcoming changes, so I wanted it in my favorite subreddit. I work for a printing company, and as I tell a lot of people, much of my job is literally malicious compliance. People wanting things printed despite how they look, spelling and design errors, and just being plain ugly. This is another story that has come up these past 2 weeks. A while ago, one of the other locations absolutely destroyed one of their printers. Toner everywhere, the finisher unit was a hunk of plastic and metal. I genuinely don't know what they did to the machine, but it was FUBAR based on the photo, especially since the toner cartridge is not in the finisher unit. An investigation took place and it was discovered that rather than calling in printer technicians to repair the machines, some of the company employees were repairing them instead. A company-wide message went out essentially telling everyone not to repair or perform maintenance on the machine ourselves. Genuinely, common sense things that had to be put on paper because someone did something stupid. We were always supposed to put in service calls to the techs to come take care of the machines or we will be brought to HR. 3 months later, last week. 2 guys from loss prevention, who will be Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, came in to do a regular check-in. Everything was going great, until I needed to change the paper in one of the printers. Tweedledum approached me and basically began raking me over the coals, saying that only technicians can open the machines. Of course I am dumbfounded because all I am doing is changing the paper, but just shrug and say sorry, won't happen again. Well, the next day, I was brought into a meeting with HR over a video call, basically wagging their finger at me. My boss, D, took the fall for me and said he was the one to tell me to change the paper, so I got off scot-free and D only got a slap on the wrist, thankfully so, as this would have been my second write-up in 2 months. The first was a stupid but legitimate mistake on my part. However, as a result of this, the whole facility went into malicious compliance mode after that meeting. Need to change out the paper trays? Service call. Paper jam? Better put in a service call. Need to change the toner? That's a service call. Our output of jobs last week was absolutely in the toilet. Machines were down for nearly 90% of the shifts. The techs were having a field day, however, as they got paid per call they took. While our backlog is through the roof, we were able to make our point eventually. I am not sure exactly what had been happening in the background, but today I received a handwritten apology from Tweedledum and Tweedledummer with a $50 Visa gift card, saying they didn't understand what our job required when they reprimanded me and referred me to HR. We are back at full capacity now, and have a huge backlog to catch up on. I am hoping in addition to this gift card, I can also get in some approved overtime for some extra spending money on an upcoming trip I have planned. The company I work for may be dim at times, but at least they often admit when they make a mistake. Update 1. So I learned a bit more about the situation. The loss prevention people that were involved were the ones directly dealing with the loss of the destroyed printer, and there turned out to be a misunderstanding about everything. My other co-workers in the copy center has gotten into the habit of putting excess paper in the opposite side the paper tray as storage. The tray can hold up to 12 by 18 paper. So when there is 8.5 times 11 in there, they use the extra space for storage. The techs in D has told them not to do that as they can damage the machine. Whenever I see the excess paper, I take it out. That's what loss protection saw, and why they reprimanded me in the first place. They assumed since I was working with the machines, I was the one who put that extra paper in. I learned this when the company assigned Karen was written up, and made it rather vocal today. The problem with working with a good company like this is that it takes way too long to get rid of problem employees. WTF? An apology and a gift card? Nice. Plus maybe $1 overtime. I like companies that try to show they do care. It's why I stick with this strange collection of clowns. As long as we do our work, they support us. Very rarely do you find a company that understands happy employees means increased productivity. Beautiful. I have found that most people don't understand the difference between maintenance and standard working procedures. Glad your compliance highlighted their ignorance. It baffles me how modern people, like, presumably, these loss prevention officers, can be unclear on the concepts of replenishing a resource, paper, toner, on something like a printer, and how this is different from, say, taking a printer apart. Also, how did HR not figure this out either, and made sure that someone took blame, in this case, your boss? At least they learned their lesson. From my understanding, there was a shakeup with the management above while I was on long-term disability. Everything stayed the same, or in some cases gotten better, but the new management is still figuring out everything. I love an MC where the fallout not only gets your point across, but also scores a win for someone else. Graphic designer here. This definitely rings a bell. Some customers just have to piss in a job before they like the taste. With frequent offenders, I would often make an intentional mistake, just so they would have something to moan about. I'm freelance now, and much happier. I was advised to always include a somewhat shitty choice when presenting options. I am not sure exactly what had been happening in the background, but today I received a handwritten apology from Tweedledum and Tweedledummer with a $50 Visa gift card. Dum-dums aren't completely stupid. Handwriting doesn't leave a trail like an email does, so if there is more blowback they can cover up what exactly happened and deny fault. Or was it handwritten because the printers still didn't work? LOL. Nice of them to give you a card at least. Every dumb policy has a dumb thing that caused it. But most dumb policies will be enforced dumbly, so it's just a cycle. The important part here is someone high up took the time to find the root cause, track down the people responsible, and had a word with them about not sticking their nose in where they don't understand what the job needs. And made them apologize. Tell me that the company has cleared your and your boss's name with HR. That is the dumbest thing I've read. That was my thought too. A gift card is nice and all, but you really need that strike taken off your record. My Xerox tech would lose his mind if a ticket came in to help me change the paper. He'd legit call and ask if I was fucking joking right now. Sometimes I get orders with people asking to have the same image printed on every single paper we sell. He'd snap harder than I would. That pretty much was the first reaction to the tech when we put in our ticket. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.